All right, today we are pulling back the curtain on something you probably never think about, but it's working to protect you every single day. We're talking about the incredibly detailed step-by-step system that makes sure the medicine you take is actually safe. Let's dive in.
So just think about it for a second. You open your medicine cabinet, you take a pill, you just trust that it's going to work and that it's not going to hurt you. But why? Where does that trust come from? Well, it's not just blind faith. It's built on a massive, really sophisticated system that operates completely behind the scenes.
And this quote right here, this is the whole point. This is the guiding principle, the North Star for everything we're about to talk about. Every single rule, every check, every procedure, it all comes back to this one simple idea. Do not put patients at risk. It's all about safety, quality, and making sure the medicine does its job.
So where does it all begin? Well, it starts at the very top with a huge overarching strategy. Think of it as the master plan for quality, and it's called the Pharmaceutical Quality System, or PQS for short.
Now, I know that sounds a little formal, right? The sum total of the organized arrangements. So what does that actually mean? Let's use an analogy. Imagine you're building a massive skyscraper. The PQS isn't just the blueprint for one floor. No, it's the entire philosophy of the architectural firm, their complete system for guaranteeing that the building is safe and structurally sound from the initial design all the way to the grand opening. So this master plan has to cover every possible angle. And the key thing here is that it's proactive, not reactive. You're not waiting for something to go wrong. You design quality into the product from day one. You define every single step. You vet every supplier. You train every person. And you are constantly monitoring everything. If something does go wrong, a deviation, you don't just fix it, you dig deep to find the root cause so it never ever happens again. It's a system that's always learning.
Okay, so if the PQS is the high-level master plan, how does it actually translate to the factory floor? How do you put it into practice? Well, that's where the next layer comes in. Good manufacturing practice, or GMP.
The magic word here is consistently. GMP is all about making sure that every batch of medicine is an identical copy of the last one. Going back to our skyscraper, if the PQS is the architect's grand vision, GMP is the super detailed construction blueprint and the strict building code. It's the set of rules every single worker has to follow, to the letter, every single day, no exceptions.
And you can really see the step-by-step logic here. Look at the emphasis on clarity and proof. First, define the process. Then, make sure you have the right people, the right space, the right equipment. Step 3 is huge. Write instructions that are so clear they cannot be misunderstood. And then, step 4, you document everything. This creates an ironclad paper trail, a record that proves every step was followed exactly as planned.
So we have the master plan, the PQS. We have the building code, GMP. But who's actually checking the quality of the materials? Who's making sure the work is being done right as it happens? You need an inspector, right? And that brings us to our third layer, quality control.
Quality control, or QC, is the hands-on scientific part of the process. This is the team in the lab. In our building analogy, QC is the independent inspector who shows up on site. They're taking samples of the concrete mix, they're testing the strength of the steel beams, they're making sure everything being used is up to spec. QC provides the hard data, the objective proof that the process is actually working and the product is what it's supposed to be.
So let's just quickly put it all together. It's a 3-layered defense system. You've got the PQS, which is the overall strategy, the master plan. Underneath that, you have GMP, the specific rules for production, the blueprint. And checking everything along the way is QC, the inspection. Each part is essential, and they all work together to create this incredibly robust system.
Okay, so the product has been made according to the blueprint, and it's passed all the inspections. It's ready for the public now, right? We're done? Well, not quite. There is one more absolutely critical phase.
Because even with all these amazing systems, all these procedures, all these automated checks, the final, ultimate decision doesn't rest with a computer or a machine. It rests with a person.
And that person has a special title, the Qualified Person, or QP. This is the final gatekeeper. The QP's job is to review everything for a batch, all the manufacturing records, all the QC test results, any deviation reports, and then personally sign their name to it, certifying that it meets all the requirements. In our building analogy, this is the official who issues the final certificate of occupancy, legally declaring the skyscraper is safe for people to enter. It's a huge responsibility.
But here's the thing that makes this system so powerful. Even after the QP signs off and the medicine is on the pharmacy shelf, the job still isn't done. A core part of that high-level PQS is the idea of continual improvement. The system is designed to constantly learn and get better.
And this is how it learns. At least once a year, they do what's called a product quality review. Think of it like a deep dive annual physical for the medicine. They look at all the raw materials they've used, they analyze test results to see if there are any subtle trends, they review every single complaint or deviation, and they ask the big question: is there anything we can do better? It ensures the quality never, ever gets stagnant.
So that's really the big picture. It's this hidden, step-by-step architecture of plans, rules, and checks, all working together in the background. From that high-level master plan, down to the detailed manufacturing blueprint, to the constant on-the-ground inspections, it's a chain of accountability designed for one purpose, and one purpose only: to protect you.
So the next time you open that medicine bottle, maybe you'll see it a little differently. Does knowing about this whole unseen world, this immense system of plans, practices, and human checks standing behind that one simple pill, change how you think about it? It's definitely something to consider.
Think about the last time you took a pill. Maybe for a headache, maybe an allergy. It's this tiny, perfect little thing, right? But have you ever wondered how it gets to you? It's not just about machines and chemicals. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the most critical ingredient of all: the people. Which brings up a huge question, right? It's one thing to make a life-saving drug once, but how do you guarantee that millions of doses are all perfectly identical, perfectly safe, and perfectly effective every single time? I mean, when you're talking about medicine, the stakes are about as high as they get. Well, the answer is, surprisingly, human. Before a single chemical gets mixed, before any fancy machine is even turned on, it all begins with an incredibly detailed plan. A step-by-step guide designed entirely for the people who will run the whole show. So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the most basic idea, the human foundation. Then we'll check out the organizational blueprint. We'll meet the 3 key leaders who hold it all together, dig into the intense training they all go through, and wrap up with the daily hygiene rules they live by. Let's jump in. All right, so where does it all begin? Not with a complicated formula or a piece of machinery, but with a simple core principle. This is what we call the human foundation, and believe me, it supports absolutely everything else. And here it is, straight from the official EU rulebook: the correct manufacture of medicinal products relies upon people. Now, this isn't some feel-good corporate slogan they hang on a wall. It is a fundamental legal and ethical rule. It means no matter how amazing the tech gets, the ultimate responsibility always comes down to people. Okay, so if people are the foundation, how do you build on top of that? Well, you need a blueprint, a super detailed organizational plan that makes sure everyone and everything works together flawlessly. Because when you're making medicine, there is zero room for error. And that blueprint, it starts right at the very top. Senior management has the ultimate responsibility here. This is something they absolutely cannot delegate. They have to provide all the resources, define every single role with crystal clarity, and constantly check in on the system to prove that it's actually working. Quality isn't just a goal. For them, it's a non-negotiable duty. And this is where you really see the obsession with detail. The regulations are so specific. There has to be an org chart. Every key person must have a written job description. So why all the paperwork? Because in this world, any confusion can be genuinely dangerous. The entire system is engineered to get rid of any gaps or overlaps where a critical safety step could get missed. So we've got our blueprint, but who are the pillars holding this whole structure up day in and day out? Well, it really comes down to 3 key leaders, and each one has a very specific, very critical job. Now, before we even get into who they are, this is probably the single most important rule of the whole system. The person in charge of production, the person making the drug, and the person in charge of quality control, the one checking it, they must be independent. They can't report to each other. It's a brilliant, built-in system of checks and balances, designed so no one ever feels pressured to cut a corner. And this just lays it out perfectly. Think of it as the maker versus the checker. The head of production, our maker, is all about making sure the drug is produced exactly according to the plan. But the head of quality control, the checker, has the totally independent power to say yes or no to raw materials, packaging, even the finished product. You'll notice they both have to train their teams, but their core jobs are kept separate on purpose. And then you've got the third pillar, the final gatekeeper. This is the qualified person, or QP. This is a role required by law, and the weight of responsibility is just immense. This one person personally signs off on every single batch, certifying that it meets every single legal and quality standard. Their name is literally on the line. The job is so important that they have to be available to the company all the time, and their duties can only ever be handed off to another certified QP. Okay, so we have the structure, and we have the leaders. But a blueprint is just paper without the know-how to make it real. So how does this whole system actually come to life? Well, through intense A to Z training that basically activates every single person involved. So, who exactly gets trained on all these strict rules? The scientists? The lab techs? Yep, of course. But it goes way, way further than that. The short answer is absolutely everyone whose job could possibly affect the final product. That means the maintenance folks, the people working in the warehouse, even the cleaning staff. In this kind of environment, there's no such thing as a small job. And the training follows this really clear step-by-step life cycle. Every new person starts with foundational training on the core principles. Then they get specific training for their exact role. If their job takes them into a high-risk area, like a sterile clean room, they get even more specialized training. And here's the thing, it never stops. Their skills and knowledge are constantly being assessed and refreshed. And get this, the system is so airtight that even a visitor or a contractor can't just wander in. If they absolutely have to go into a production area, they get a briefing on all the rules beforehand and are supervised the entire time they're in there. There are no exceptions, none. So, the team is structured, they're led, and they're always being trained. But how is that incredible standard of quality kept up minute by minute right there on the factory floor? It all comes down to a set of daily hygiene rules that are completely non-negotiable. And these rules are absolute, starting with the really obvious stuff. No food, no drinks, no chewing gum anywhere near production. Why? Because even the tiniest crumb is a totally unacceptable risk for contamination. Same deal with smoking. It's not just that you can't smoke in there, you can't even store any smoking materials in these controlled areas. It's all about eliminating any possible contamination in the air. Personal health is a massive factor too. If someone has an infectious disease or even something as simple as a cut on their hand, they are not allowed in the manufacturing areas. It's all about preventing any kind of biological contamination. And to protect the product from the people, everyone who walks in has to wear specific protective clothing. This creates a solid, non-negotiable barrier between the person and the medicine they're making. And it all comes back to the most fundamental rule of all, constant, thorough hand washing. It's that final, simple step that reinforces this whole culture of absolute cleanliness and control every single day. Which, brings us right back to where we started. All of these steps, the org chart, the leaders, the training, the strict daily rules, they all exist to support this one powerful idea. The entire system is built to empower people to do their jobs perfectly every single time. So yeah, this system is incredibly complex, but its whole purpose is beautifully simple. It's all there to protect you. So the next time you hold a simple pill in your hand, maybe you'll see it a little differently. Not just as a product, but as the final step of a really long journey, made possible by a huge, dedicated team of people.
Have you ever wondered what's really going on inside one of those buildings where medicine is made? It's kind of a hidden world, and it's governed by an incredibly strict set of rules. So today, we're going to get a special inside look.
we'll be using the European Union's official safety blueprint, the Good Manufacturing Practice Guidelines, to see exactly how every single medicine is protected step by step.
You know, this whole massive blueprint really boils down to one central question. How do you build a fortress against contamination? Because that's exactly what a pharmaceutical facility is designed to be, a fortress. Every wall, every pipe, every procedure is a carefully planned defense mechanism to protect the medicine inside.
So a fortress this complex has to be built on a solid foundation, right? And it is. The entire thing is built on one core principle. You can think of it as the mission statement that governs everything, from the architectural plans right down to the daily cleaning schedule.
What's so important here are those two specific goals: minimize human error and prevent contamination. That's it. Every single rule we're about to walk through is designed to serve one of those two critical objectives. It's all about making the system as foolproof and as clean as humanly possible.
Okay, so let's start our virtual tour. And just like with any good fortress, the defenses don't start at the front door. They start on the outside, with the very ground the facility is built on.
This first layer of defense basically treats the entire building like a sealed bubble. A little crack in an exterior wall, that's not a maintenance issue. In this world, that's a security breach. The location, the cleaning, the pest control, it's all designed to completely isolate the facility from the outside world. And unauthorized people, absolutely not allowed.
And that level of control extends to things you can't even see, like the air itself. Every element, the lighting, the temperature, the humidity, the ventilation, is controlled with incredible precision. A temperature that's off by just a little bit could ruin an entire batch of ingredients. Too much humidity could grind production to a halt. The goal here is a perfectly stable internal environment where absolutely nothing is left to chance.
All right, now we're stepping inside, into the heart of the facility, the production core. This is where the medicine is actually being made. And as you can imagine, this is where the risk of contamination and the defenses against it are at their absolute highest.
In here, the primary enemy, the main villain of the story, has a name: cross-contamination. This is public enemy number one. It's the risk of a microscopic particle of one medicine getting into another, which, could have devastating consequences for a patient. The entire design of this area is a masterclass in making sure that never, ever happens.
So, how is this inner sanctum defended? Well, for starters, the layout is designed like a one-way street for production. This prevents mix-ups and backtracking. But the real genius is in the surfaces themselves. Every single wall, floor, and pipe is engineered to be perfectly smooth and seamless. This leaves absolutely no crevices, no cracks, no place for a contaminant to hide. It's an environment that's actively hostile to dirt.
But what about really high-risk materials? Things like certain powerful antibiotics. Well, for those, the risk is so great that even these extreme measures aren't considered enough. The only solution is the ultimate one: a completely separate, totally dedicated building. It's literally a fortress within the fortress, guaranteeing zero possibility of cross-contamination with any other product. Now, the production core is amazing, but it can't operate alone. It relies on these critical support areas. Think of them as essential wings of the facility, and each one has its own set of strict rules, all designed to protect that central core.
First up, storage. Now I want you to erase any image you might have of a dusty, old warehouse. That is not what this is. This is a highly controlled environment designed to protect every single material from the moment it arrives to the moment it leaves as part of a finished product.
This whole controlled environment is built around the idea of quarantine. Every single material that arrives is treated as guilty until proven innocent. It's immediately isolated, locked down, and sampled. Nothing gets cleared to enter the production area until the quality control labs give the official final green light.
And speaking of that green light, that brings us to our second support wing, the Quality Control Labs. This is the scientific command center of the entire facility. And to make absolutely sure its results are completely unbiased, it is always physically separate from the production areas.
The labs are designed with that same obsessive attention to detail we saw in production. The layout is all about preventing mix-ups, and super sensitive instruments are shielded in their own rooms to prevent any interference. Every rule here serves one purpose: guaranteeing that every single test result is accurate and trustworthy.
Okay, our final support wing covers what are called ancillary areas. Now, this might sound a little boring, but stick with me. You'd think a break room is just a break room or a workshop is just a workshop, right? Well, not in this blueprint.
The logic here is just total, uncompromising isolation. Restrooms and toilets can never, ever open directly into production or storage areas. Even the maintenance workshop has to be kept separate. And why? Because anything that isn't directly part of making the medicine must be physically walled off from the clean core. It's all about preventing any possible source of contamination.
So we've designed the building from the ground up. We've thought about every room, every surface. But what about the tools and machines we put inside it? Well, as you've probably guessed by now, the equipment is governed by the exact same strict principles.
This right here is the golden rule for any piece of equipment. Let's put it in simple terms. Any part of a machine that physically touches the medicine has to be completely inert. It can't react with the product, it can't add anything to it, and it can't absorb anything from it. The machine's job is to make the medicine, not to become part of it. These rules follow a machine through its entire life. It starts with its design. It has to be easy to clean. Then it moves to its strict calibration schedule to make sure it's always accurate. And if a machine breaks or becomes defective, it's immediately taken out of service or clearly labeled. In this system, there is zero room for error from faulty equipment.
Okay, we've just toured the entire facility, from the foundation all the way to the individual machines inside. Let's just take one final step back and see how all these thousands and thousands of details actually come together.
And this is the ultimate takeaway. Every single rule, from the smoothness of a wall to the specific label on a tiny pipe, is a deliberate, calculated step. All of these details work together in harmony for one profoundly important reason: to ensure that the medicine we and our families rely on is safe and effective, every single time.
I mean, it's an incredibly detailed, incredibly demanding blueprint, which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. In a system this complex, where every single step is designed for safety, what is the real cost of taking just one single shortcut?
Have you ever wondered what really guarantees the medicine you take is safe? Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on something that might not sound glamorous, but is absolutely critical: paperwork. We're going to walk through the incredibly detailed world of pharmaceutical documentation step by step to see how this system protects every single one of us. So let's just start with this question right here. A company makes millions, maybe even billions of pills in a single batch. How on earth can they be sure that the very last pill to come off the line is exactly as safe and effective as the very first one? The scale of that is just mind-boggling, right? But there is an answer. And that answer is a global standard called Good Manufacturing Practice, or GMP for short. You can think of it as the ultimate rulebook for making medicine. It's not just a friendly suggestion, it's a whole system designed to make sure every product is made and controlled to the absolute highest quality standards every single time. But here's the kicker. The real heart of GMP isn't some super advanced robot or a secret chemical formula. It's documentation, paperwork. That is the absolute backbone of this entire system. Without it, nothing works. It's what's used to control, monitor, and, most importantly, record every single thing that happens. So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll meet the two main families of documents. Then, we'll look at how the master plan, the blueprint, gets created. After that, we'll see how these rules actually play out on the factory floor. And finally, we'll talk about the surprisingly long life these documents have. Okay, first things first. Every single document in this entire system can be sorted into one of two categories. And the easiest way to think about them is like this. You've got a recipe book and you've got a kitchen diary. One tells you exactly what to do, and the other proves that you actually did it. Simple as that. And this chart lays it out perfectly. On the left, you have instructions. These are your directions, your requirements, your recipe. This is all about what you're supposed to do. And on the right, you have records and reports. This is the evidence, the history, the diary. This is the proof of what was actually done, who did it, and when. So what do these recipes look like in the real world? Well, you've got specifications, which basically define how pure your ingredients need to be. You've got the manufacturing formula, which is literally the list of ingredients and how much of each to use. And then you have the really detailed playbooks, like processing instructions and SOPs, or standard operating procedures. These tell you how to do everything step by step, from making the drug to cleaning the machines. Now for the diary side. The star of the show here is the batch record. This document tells the entire life story of one batch of medicine from start to finish. Then you have things like certificates of analysis, which prove it passed all its tests, and logbooks that track every time a piece of equipment was used or cleaned. All these pieces of evidence come together to build that complete, unbreakable history. Okay, so we know what the documents are, but how do those instructions, those all-important recipes, get made in the first place? You can't just type one up and call it a day. The process for creating them is intensely controlled to make sure there is zero chance of an error. It follows this really strict life cycle. First, it's designed to be super clear and easy to follow. Then it gets reviewed by a team of experts. After that, someone in authority has to officially approve it, sign it, and date it. Only then are official copies made and carefully handed out. And even then, it's not done. They are constantly being reviewed to make sure they're never out of date. And get this, the language itself is regulated. The rules say instructions must be written in an imperative mandatory style. That means they use commands. Weigh 10 grams, set temperature to 50 degrees, record result. There is no room for interpretation. No, you should probably, no guesswork. It's all about clear, direct commands. All right, we've got our approved recipes. Now for the fun part. Let's head out onto the factory floor and see how people actually use them. We're shifting gears now from creating the instructions to the real-world rules for filling out the records, for writing in that diary. And the number one most important rule is this. You write it down the second you do it, not before, and definitely not after. You can't wait until the end of your shift and try to remember what you did. You can't fill it out ahead of time. It has to be done in real time, right as the action happens. That's what creates a reliable, moment-by-moment account of what happened. And there are some golden rules for how you make those entries. Everything must be clear and readable. It has to be written in permanent ink. That's right, no pencils. Every entry has to be traceable, which means you initial it so everyone knows who wrote it. And finally, it has to be complete. You can't leave any blank spaces where someone might add something later. So what happens if you make a mistake? I mean, we're all human. Well, you can't just scribble it out or use correction fluid. There's a very specific 3-step process. 1, cross out the mistake with a single line so you can still read what was underneath. 2, write the correct information right next to it. And 3, sign or initial it and add the date. This way, every change is totally transparent and accounted for. Okay, on to our final section. The medicine is made. It's in the box. It's shipped out the door. You'd think the story ends there, right? Wrong. The journey for its paperwork is actually far from over. These documents have a long, long legacy. So why keep all this paper around for years? It all comes down to patient safety. This paper trail means that if a problem is ever discovered with a medicine, even years down the road, investigators can pull that exact batch record. They can see exactly what happened, what materials were used, and who did what. It's the key to figuring out what went wrong and protecting other patients. And we aren't talking about a few months. For most medicines, the complete documentation for a batch has to be kept for a minimum of 5 years after the product has been officially released for sale. 5 years. Here's a quick breakdown. For normal medicine you'd buy at the pharmacy, it's 1 year past the expiration date or 5 years after it was released, whichever is longer. And for drugs that are still in clinical trials, the records have to be kept for at least 5 years after the entire study is over. So this information sticks around for a very long time. So if you take one thing away from all of this, let it be this. Every single pill, every single dose of medicine has a detailed, verifiable paper trail behind it. It's proof that it was made exactly the way it was supposed to be. It's what guarantees that the millionth pill really is just as safe as the very first. And that brings us to one final, really interesting question for the future. We've been talking about paperwork, but so much of this is moving into the digital world. The principles are all the same, but the technology is changing. So how do we build digital systems that can protect these absolutely critical records and keep them readable and secure, not just for 5 years, but for decades to come? That is the next big challenge in keeping us all safe. You know, have you ever just looked at a tiny little pill and really thought about what it took to get to you? It seems so simple, right? But it's actually the end result of this incredibly complex, super high-stakes journey, where even one tiny mistake is just not an option. So today, let's follow that journey, step by step. So how do you actually guarantee that a pill made today is absolutely identical to one that's going to be made 6 months from now? Or, that a pill someone takes in New York is exactly the same as one in London? The answer? Well, it's not magic. It's a really powerful and strict framework. It's called Good Manufacturing Practice, or GMP for short. And you've got to understand, this isn't just a set of helpful suggestions. It is the master blueprint for making medicine, period. This rulebook dictates literally everything, from the quality of the air in the factory to the type of ink on the label. And look, when I say it dictates everything, I mean everything. This is not some friendly recommendation. It's a strict, legally binding set of rules with absolutely zero room for someone to just make it up as they go. Okay, I know this quote from the official guidelines might sound a bit, corporate and dry, but what it really means is the core principle of the entire system. Nothing, and I mean nothing, is left to chance. You can't improvise, you can't find a better way on the spot. You have to follow the exact pre-approved procedure every single time. It's all about making the process perfectly predictable. So where does this whole journey begin for our pill? Well, it's probably not where you think. It's not in a shiny lab or a big mixing vat. It all starts at the factory loading dock. The moment those raw ingredients arrive, the scrutiny is just intense. Every single thing that goes into that pill, from the main active ingredient down to the simplest filler, it all has to pass through this strict 4-stage checkpoint. First, it's received and verified, but then it immediately hits the most critical step: quarantine. It's basically put into isolation. Think of this quarantine step as a mandatory, high-security waiting room for all the ingredients. They are completely locked down, sometimes physically, sometimes digitally, and they are forbidden from even getting near the production line until quality control runs a whole battery of tests. Only then, if everything is perfect, do they get the green light. If even a single container looks a little banged up, the whole batch gets investigated. And what's really wild is that this whole quality control process starts long before the ingredients even arrive. You can't just order this stuff from the cheapest place online. Nope. Manufacturers have to build this deep, verified relationship with their suppliers. That means auditing their facilities, mapping out the entire supply chain, and signing formal quality agreements. It's a partnership that's built on just relentless verification. Okay. So our ingredients are finally approved and they're out of quarantine. Now we head into the heart of the factory. And in here, the #1 priority, the obsession, is preventing contamination, making absolutely sure nothing unwanted gets into our pill. So in a huge facility where they might be making dozens of different products, what do you think is the single biggest danger to the purity of our pill? It's this right here. Cross-contamination. Now, this could be anything. Dust from one product floating over and mixing with another, maybe some residue that was left on a piece of equipment, or even tiny particles carried on an operator's clothes. It's a huge, huge risk, and preventing it is a science all on its own. And the ways they stop this from happening are just incredible. I mean, on the technical side, we're talking about things like completely separate air filtration systems for different areas. So not even a single airborne particle can drift from one production line to another. And on the organizational side, they use tactics like campaign production. This means they might only make one specific drug in an entire area for weeks, and then follow that with a deep clean that is so rigorous, it has to be scientifically proven to be effective before they can even think about making a different product there. All right, our pill is now perfectly made, it's pure, and it's free from any contamination. But hold on, the journey isn't over yet. Getting it into its final bottle or blister pack is just as critical, and believe me, every bit is regulated. Before a single new pill can enter the packaging line, something called a line clearance has to be done. The best way to think about this is like a forensic deep clean. Every single trace of the last product, every stray label, every document, every last bit of material has to be removed and accounted for. And this is all documented on a checklist to make sure a catastrophic mix-up is basically impossible. And if you want to know just how detailed this gets, check this out. The GMP guidelines even have a preference for the type of labels you use. Roll feed labels are what they prefer because they come in one long continuous strip, which makes it way harder to accidentally introduce the wrong label. Those loose, pre-cut labels, they're seen as a much higher risk because, well, it's just too easy to mix them up. It's that specific. And while that packaging line is running, it's under constant surveillance. You've got both people and automated scanners checking everything in real time. Just think about the expiry date. If a printer smudges even one number on a single box, there are automated systems designed to spot it, physically reject that box, and sound an alarm. It's a non-stop, continuous process of verification. So, the pill is made, it's packaged, it's all boxed up, it's finally ready to go to the pharmacy, right? Well, not quite. There's one last, absolutely crucial gate it has to pass through. That's right, one last quarantine. The finished packaged medicine is held in a totally secure area. It cannot be sold or shipped until the quality control department reviews the entire batch record. That means every test result, every signature, every checklist from the entire journey, and then personally signs off on its final release. And this is what shows you just how seriously the system treats any kind of failure. Anything that doesn't pass a check at any stage is immediately slapped with a rejected label and locked away. Whether it gets sent back to the supplier or destroyed, every single action has to be formally approved and recorded. In this whole process, there are simply no loose ends. So let's just quickly recap the 4 major steps of our pill's journey. It all starts with raw materials that are received, quarantined, and tested like crazy. Then it's processed in an environment that is totally obsessed with preventing contamination. After that, it's meticulously packaged with check after check to avoid any mix-ups. And finally, it's held for one last quality review before it can ever reach you. So the next time you see a simple pill, just remember that invisible system working behind it. We're talking hundreds of rules, thousands of checks, and countless dedicated people, all working together. And why do they do it? To make absolutely sure that the medicine you and your family rely on is exactly what it's supposed to be. Predictable, pure, and above all, safe. Every single time.
Have you ever really looked at a pill before you take it and wondered about the incredible, invisible journey it's been on? It's a journey that's all about one thing: quality. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that entire process. Let's dive deep into the world of quality control and see the step-by-step path that makes sure our medicine is safe and effective.
So, what is quality control, or QC, really? Well, think of it as the ultimate, non-negotiable gatekeeper. The official definition talks about sampling, specifications, and testing, but what it all boils down to is this: nothing, and I mean nothing, gets released until its quality is judged to be 100% satisfactory. It's not a guideline, it's an ironclad rule.
And here's maybe the most important principle of all. Quality control has to be completely independent from production. It makes perfect sense, right? Production's job is to make the medicine, to be efficient. But QC's job, their only goal is to be the unbiased judge of quality. They have to be separate to make sure that the goal of efficiency never, ever compromises safety.
All right, so to really get this, we're going to walk through the whole thing step by step. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the principal, the guardian of quality.
Then we'll see how the stage is set. We'll follow a sample as it's taken, put to the test, and see how it gets the final green light. And you know what? We'll even see how that medicine is watched over for its entire lifetime.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the Guardian of Quality. Before we get into any lab coats or test tubes, we have to understand the fundamental role and the huge responsibility that sits on the shoulders of the QC department.
You know, the duties of QC go way beyond what you might imagine. It's not just about running tests. They're the ones who establish and prove that their own test procedures work. They oversee libraries of samples. They make sure every label is perfect. They monitor products for years, and they're even the detectives who investigate any quality complaints. It's a massive job.
With that in mind, let's move on to setting the stage. Because before you can run a single test, the foundation for quality has to be rock solid. And that means having the right place and the right paperwork. Believe it or not, quality control starts with the building itself. The physical design of a laboratory is meticulously planned out. Everything from the airflow to where equipment is placed is designed to prevent one sample from accidentally contaminating another. Every little detail is controlled to protect the integrity of the science.
And then there's the paperwork. The absolute backbone of this entire system is documentation. The number one rule in this world is, if you didn't write it down, it never happened. Every spec, every procedure, every calibration record for every single instrument, it's all documented, creating a perfect, traceable audit trail.
Okay, now we're getting to the very first hands-on action in our step-by-step journey. Section 3, sampling. This sounds simple, but honestly, it's one of the most critical moments in the whole shebang.
See, taking a sample isn't just about scooping some powder. The procedure is incredibly detailed. It defines the exact method, the specific tools you have to use, the precise amount you need to take, the right container for it, how to label it. Every single step is laid out to make sure that sample is perfect every single time.
And why all this precision? Well, because that tiny little sample has to be a perfect mirror of the entire batch. We could be talking about a small vial that speaks for hundreds of thousands of pills. The fate of that whole batch rests on the quality of that one sample. So yeah, getting it right is everything.
So, with our perfect sample in hand, we have arrived at the heart of the operation. Welcome to Section 4, Putting Quality to the Test. This is where the real science happens.
And just like with everything else, every single test is documented like crazy. Just look at this list. It's not just about the final number. It's about who did the test, and then who verified their work. What specific machine was used? When did it happen? This creates total accountability. Every result can be traced back and proven.
So, how do they know if a test result is actually correct? They measure it against a benchmark. Labs use what are called official reference standards. You can think of these as the certified gold standard for what that medicine is supposed to be. By comparing their sample against this gold standard, they know their results are accurate.
Now, this all works great when things are going according to plan. But what happens when a result comes back and it's not right? What happens when a test actually fails?
A failed test or an out-of-specification result doesn't just mean you toss the batch. No way. Instead, it triggers an immediate, full-blown investigation. There's a formal procedure for this, to dig in and find the root cause. Was it a simple lab error, a problem with the sample, or is there a real issue with the batch? The investigation has to find the answer.
And all of this brings us to the ultimate decision point, Section 5, the final green light. After every test is done and all the data is collected, someone has to make the final, critical call. And that final decision? It isn't just based on that one lab report. It's a complete, holistic review of everything. The person making the call looks at the production records, tests done during manufacturing, all the documentation, and even physically examines the final product in its packaging. A batch only gets released when every single piece of the puzzle fits perfectly. But wait, the story doesn't end when the medicine ships out. You might think the job is done, but QC has one more vital, long-term mission. Welcome to Section 6, Monitoring for a Lifetime. This is called the Ongoing Stability Program, and its whole purpose is to keep monitoring a product long after it's hit the pharmacy shelf. It's the system that guarantees a medicine you find in your cabinet is just as safe and just as effective on its expiration date as it was the day it was made. And this isn't just a random checkup. It's all laid out in a formal, written plan called a protocol. You can see the parameters here. It specifies which batches to test, what tests to run, the pass-fail limits, and, crucially, the exact time points and storage conditions that are designed to mimic real-world shelf life.
So how many batches do they actually check this way? The rule is pretty clear. Unless you have a really good reason not to, at least one batch of every single product in every single strength made each year has to be enrolled in this long-term stability program. That is a massive, continuous commitment to quality.
And finally, just to show how deep this all goes, what happens if you need to move testing to a completely new lab? Well, you can't just email them the instructions. There's another meticulous, step-by-step process for that too. It involves a deep analysis, a detailed plan, and a direct comparison of results between the old lab and the new lab. It's a whole process designed to transfer knowledge without losing one single drop of quality.
So we've seen the whole journey, right? From the design of the lab itself to monitoring a pill years after it was made. It all comes back to this one fundamental question. With so many lives on the line, how do we build a system of perfect trust? The answer isn't a single test. It's this entire system, this rigorous, documented, and independent process designed from top to bottom to protect every single one of us. Have you
You know, in the world of pharmaceuticals, making a medicine is this incredibly complicated dance. But what happens when the company that actually owns the drug doesn't make it? They outsource it. And that involves a massive amount of trust. I mean, when patient safety is on the line, you have to be 100% sure the company you hired is going to get it right. So let's dive into the EU's rulebook and see exactly how it manages this high-stakes partnership. It really all boils down to this one single question. If you're a pharma company, how can you possibly guarantee the quality and safety of your product when a totally different firm is doing the manufacturing, or the testing, or even the packaging? This isn't just some business problem, right? It's a huge public health issue. And that is exactly why there's a super strict set of rules in place. And here it is. This is the core principle, pulled straight from the EU's Good Manufacturing Practice Guide. What I love about this is how simple and powerful it is. It breaks the whole thing down into 3 pillars. First, you have to define the work, crystal clear. Then you both have to agree on every single detail. And finally, you have to control the process from start to finish. This is the absolute bedrock of all outsourcing in European pharma. All right, so let's start with the company that's doing the hiring. In the rulebook, they're called the contract giver. Now, before they even dream of signing a deal, they've got a ton of homework to do. The regulations are really clear on this. The responsibility to check out a potential partner, that falls squarely on their shoulders. In this homework isn't just a casual look-see. It's a formal 3-step assessment. First up, legality. Is this company even legally allowed to do this work? Do they have the right licenses from the authorities? Second, suitability. Okay, they're legal, but do they have the right facility, the right equipment to handle this specific job? And third, competence. Do they actually have the know-how, the experience, and, most importantly, the right people to pull this off? The giver has to get a solid yes on all 3 of these before even thinking about the next step. So, once a suitable partner has been vetted and approved, the next step is getting every single thing in writing. And we are not talking about a handshake deal here. We're talking about a detailed, comprehensive, and legally binding contract that leaves absolutely no room for confusion. Think of the contract like this. It's the single source of truth for the entire partnership. Its whole purpose is to kill any misunderstandings before they even start. Who's responsible for what? What does success look like? Every duty, every process, every deadline has to be clearly spelled out and signed off on by both sides. And this just shows you how granular that contract has to be. It's got to specify exactly who is on the hook for each critical step. Who handles transferring the technology? Who's in charge of the supply chain and buying raw materials? Who's doing the quality checks? And, this is a big one, who has the final say on releasing the materials for use? Everything has to be explicitly assigned, no gray areas allowed. Now, here's a really crucial point. The contract defines the working relationship. It gives the giver the right to audit the contractor's facilities, for example. But what it does not do is change either company's legal liability to the consumer. If something goes terribly wrong and a patient gets hurt, this contract is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. That's a whole other area of the law. Okay, let's flip the coin and look at the other side of this partnership, the contract acceptor. That's the company that's been hired to do the work. They have their own set of very serious obligations under these rules. First off, the contract acceptor has to have the right stuff, the facilities, the equipment, and the skilled people to do the job right. A huge one is that they can't just make changes to the process on their own, especially if it could mess with quality. They also have to be totally okay with the fact that government authorities can show up and inspect them anytime. And finally, the onus is on them to check that everything the giver sent over, all the materials and information, is actually suitable to use. This brings up a really common question, especially in these long, complex supply chains. What if the contract acceptor needs to farm out a little piece of the work they were given? Can they just go ahead and hire their own subcontractor? And the answer is a hard no. Well, not without permission anyway. An acceptor cannot subcontract any of the work unless the original contract giver has evaluated and approved that third company first. This rule is totally non-negotiable, and it makes sense, right? It ensures the giver always knows exactly who is touching their product at every step of the way. So, the contract is signed, the work starts, but the giver's job is far from over. In fact, signing the deal is really just the beginning. The regulations demand continuous active oversight. This is not a set it and forget it kind of deal. The giver has to be constantly monitoring how the acceptor is performing. They're responsible for reviewing all the records, all the test results coming back from the contractor. They need to make absolutely sure everything is being done according to good manufacturing practice. And if there's a way to improve the process, it's on them to spot it and make sure it gets implemented. It's a very active role, not a passive one. Which, of course, brings us to the final and most important question of all. After all the contracts, the audits, the oversight, when that medicine finally reaches a patient, who is ultimately on the hook for its quality and safety? The answer is clear. It's the contract giver. And this brings us to the single biggest takeaway from all of this. You can outsource the work, but you can never outsource the responsibility. The company whose name is on that box is ultimately accountable for making sure every single step was controlled and every single batch is safe. It's a powerful reminder that in the world of medicine, the buck always stops at the top.
Every day, we take it for granted that the medicines we use are safe. But what happens when something's not quite right? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on the incredible, step-by-step safety system that kicks into high gear the moment a potential flaw is found.
It's a scary thought, right? Finding a broken tablet, or maybe a package that just looks off. But that one single report from you or your pharmacist can actually trigger this massive, highly organized, nationwide safety investigation. It's the first, and honestly the most critical link in a chain that's designed to protect all of us.
So to really see how this all works, we're going to follow the breadcrumbs. We're going to trace the path of one single complaint, step by step, and watch how it morphs from a simple report into a full-blown investigation and maybe even a nationwide recall. It's a fascinating journey that shows you exactly how public health is protected.
Okay, so the moment a complaint lands, the clock starts ticking. And I mean immediately. This isn't some suggestion box. It's an alarm bell ringing loud and clear. A formal, written procedure kicks right in to document every single detail. From that very first second, the report is taken with absolute seriousness.
And here's what's so important. To make sure there's zero bias, a special team takes over. A team that has nothing to do with sales or marketing. Their one and only job is to figure out what's going on and protect public safety. They work hand in hand with the qualified person. That's the top scientist who originally signed off on the batch, making sure they're in the loop every step of the way.
All right, let's get into the good stuff. This is where the real detective work starts. The team's first mission is to figure out the true scope of the problem. Are we looking at a 1 in a million fluke, or is this just the tip of a very, very big iceberg?
And they don't just guess. This is a methodical, 4-step process. First, they describe the defect with painstaking detail.
Then, they figure out how widespread it is. Only after that can they really assess the risk to you, the patient. And finally, they hunt for that root cause. See how each step logically builds on the last? It turns a potentially chaotic situation into a solvable puzzle. So, how do they actually do all that? Well, they've got a whole toolkit at their disposal. They go back and check the pristine reference samples that were kept at the factory. They pore over every line of the batch production records, looking for anything unusual. They even analyze distribution records to map out exactly where every single package went. It's all about connecting the dots and finding a pattern. Now, all of that digging, all that evidence gathering, it all leads to this one single moment. This is the critical decision point, deciding just how serious this problem really is. This is where everything pivots from investigation to action.
And they have to weigh two really big things. First is the severity. Like, could this flaw actually hurt someone? And if so, how badly? But then there's the extent. Are we talking about a problem in 10 boxes or 10 million? A pretty minor issue in a medicine that millions of people take could actually be a way bigger public risk than a serious defect in a tiny batch that barely left the warehouse.
And this quote right here, it says it all. This is the guiding principle, the North Star for every single decision they make. It's not about the company's reputation or how much it's going to cost. It is purely 100% about protecting public health, period.
So, if that risk assessment comes back and says the threat is just too high, the decision is made. It's time for a recall. You can think of it like throwing the entire distribution system into reverse. Everything starts getting pulled back from the market, and it has to happen fast.
Yeah, and let's be clear, a recall is not like returning a sweater to the store. It's a formal, urgent, and incredibly coordinated operation. The entire goal is to snatch that product out of the distribution network, out of warehouses, off pharmacy shelves, and away from hospitals, as fast and as completely as humanly possible. And there's a precise plan for this that can be launched day or night. First, they notify the national health regulators. Then, using those distribution records, they locate every single affected batch. That's when the call goes out to wholesalers and pharmacies to start sending it all back. As the product comes in, it's locked down in a secure quarantine area, totally separate from everything else. And at the very end, they issue a report that accounts for every single unit, making sure what was sent out matches what was recovered. Nothing gets left behind. But getting the product off the shelves, that's not the end of the story, not even close. Because the final, and you could argue the most important part of this whole thing, is making absolutely sure that this exact problem can never, ever happen again.
They do this with something called CAPA. That stands for Corrective and Preventative Actions. Think of it like this. The corrective action is the immediate band-aid. It fixes the problem right now. But the preventative action, that's the real cure. It's about finding that deep down root cause and changing the whole system to make sure it's gone for good. And, of course, they check back later to make sure the fix is actually working.
So if we just take a step back and look at the whole journey, you can see the entire chain of events, from start to finish. We followed a single complaint as it triggered an investigation, led to a risk assessment, sparked a recall, and ultimately resulted in a permanent fix. It's the full cycle, from simply spotting a problem to making sure it's totally eradicated. And that's really the amazing thing about this whole system, isn't it? It's designed to be completely invisible when it's working right. It's such a powerful reminder of all these complex, unseen systems and dedicated people working around the clock, behind the scenes, just to keep us safe. It kind of makes you wonder, what other hidden safety nets are out there protecting us every single day?
Have you ever stopped to think about what goes on behind the scenes to make sure the products you use every day are actually safe? It's definitely not magic. Nope. It's a super methodical system called self-inspection. So let's dive into this blueprint for quality. No, really, just for a second, think about it. Whether it's your medicine, the food you eat, or even the phone in your hand, there's this whole hidden process that makes sure it all works exactly like it's supposed to. It's like an invisible safety net, and understanding it step by step is really the key to seeing how quality actually happens. Okay, so first things first. Why even bother with all this? What's the real reason a company puts itself under its own microscope? Well, here's the official definition, and it's pretty clear this isn't just about, checking things out.
it has two very specific goals. First, to monitor compliance with something called good manufacturing practice. Think of those as the essential ground rules for quality production. And second, to actually propose fixes for anything that isn't up to snuff.
Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a regular checkup at the doctor, but for a company's entire process. It's all about being proactive, right? Finding any potential issues before they turn into big problems, and just making sure the whole system is healthy and running exactly the way it should. So if we're gonna stick with that health checkup idea, you might be asking, what exactly gets examined? Well, turns out it's pretty much everything. And I mean, look at this list. It is incredibly thorough. We're not just talking about the finished product on the shelf. The inspection digs into everything from the people doing the work and their training to the equipment they use, all the paperwork, and even how they handle complaints. The big takeaway here is that literally no stone is left unturned. And this little phrase is so important. It tells us that these inspections aren't just random spot checks. No way. They are systematic, they're planned out. A company actually creates a schedule to regularly check all those areas we just saw. That's how you make sure nothing gets missed and that those high standards are kept up all the time. So who are these people with the clipboards and the eagle eyes? You know, who are the auditors actually trusted to do this critical health checkup? Well, the system actually has a couple of different options. So on one hand, you've got your internal inspectors, people from inside the company who are trained for this. The huge plus here is that they know the company's processes inside and out. They know exactly where to look. But on the other hand, you can bring in external experts. And their value? A totally fresh, unbiased pair of eyes that can spot issues that maybe internal folks have just gotten used to seeing. A lot of the best systems actually use a mix of both. All right, now we get to what is maybe the most crucial part of this whole thing, the step-by-step process. Because let's be real, an inspection is totally useless if nothing happens because of it. So how do all those notes and observations turn into actual improvements? It all comes down to this really simple but powerful 4-step loop. Step 1, you record everything you see. Nothing is too minor. Step 2, you propose a fix. You don't just point out a problem, you suggest a way to solve it. Step 3, take action. This is where things actually get done. And finally, step 4, you record that the action was taken. This is what closes the loop and serves as proof that the system is actually working. See, at the end of the day, this whole self-inspection thing isn't about pointing fingers or getting people in trouble. It's a tool. It's designed to create this positive feedback cycle where a company is just constantly learning, adapting, and getting better. That's how you build a true culture of quality. Every single part of this process we've talked about, from that huge checklist at the beginning to the final signature saying a fix is done, is like a link in a chain. It's an incredibly powerful system, but it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the real-world consequences when just one of those links breaks?